Try that again. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Books and Books. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. It's wonderful. You can always tell it's October in Miami because it's only 92 degrees outside. But thank you all for joining us here in the store. And, of course, those of you watching on the internet, we appreciate your being here. For those of you who have never been here before, welcome. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, of course, welcome back. Please take a look at our Books and Books newsletter. This will give you a rundown of all the wonderful events we have at Books and Books every day, every night of the week. Of course, a lot of them are being live streamed. Of course, if you are watching and you cannot make it to the store to pick up a book, you can always call us at the number below, and we'll get a book signed for you, and you can come pick it up anytime. But today is today. We're very honored to have with us members of the Clemente family. Baseball great, family man, humanitarian, the life and enduring legacy of Roberto Clemente. This is his story as told by his family. With a swift bat and fierce athleticism, Roberto Clemente intimidated major league pitchers for 18 seasons, compiling 3,000 hits. His legs were among the quickest of his era. His throwing arm was one of the strongest, gunning down base runners from right field with incredible frequency. He would spend a career fighting for respect and finally achieve it after a historic World Series performance and a second half of a career that would have him mentioned with other greats like Jackie Robinson, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, and Mickey Mantle. But what Roberto Clemente did off the field made him an equally great humanitarian, one of the first athletes who understood how the power of sports could be used to transform not just a handful of lives, but many thousands of them would die following his heart and conscience by helping others. Clemente was on an aircraft loaded with supplies for an earthquake-stricken Nicaragua when the plane crashed into the Atlantic Ocean. 40 years after that tragic day, the widow and sons of this regal athlete and consummate humanitarian open up for the first time about the husband and father they lost. Featuring an extensive array of rare and never-before-seen photographs of Clemente on the field and off, this powerful memoir tells his inspiring story from the voices who knew him best. Vera, Roberto Jr., Luis, and Ricky Clemente live in Texas and Puerto Rico and continue to preserve the memory of the loving husband and inspiring father they knew best and the selfless person and epic baseball player the world will never forget. Together as a family, they founded the Roberto Clemente Foundation to help disadvantaged youths. Vera is currently the Goodwill Ambassador for Major League Baseball. Please help me in welcoming Vera and Luis Clemente.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to meet all of you and a pleasure to be here today. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. We are very, very honored to be here and very proud about the book that we just published. It's the first time we actually do it, and it was 40 years of reading other people's books and seeing how the fans reacted to it. And, you know, we're very, very honored from the fans that they have, throughout all these years, they've really come to love that and have him as an icon and as an example for many generations. But we wanted to share more of who the person was. And probably everyone has read about his accomplishments, but don't know how hard it was for him and what was going on in his mind while he went through all those phases. And it's really interesting how Dad never tolerated prejudice, and he was always, you know, favoring the fans, supporting the fans, the working class. And recently I saw a video of an interview in Pittsburgh when we were there for Roberto Clemente Day that I had only seen just parts of it. And when I saw it, we were more concerned about Mom seeing it, and I was the one who broke down. And because in that interview, it was with Sam Nover in Pittsburgh, it was days before his 3,000 hit, he says many things that it took me a while to kind of like figure out what he meant by what he said in that interview. And he said that he wanted his sons to suffer. He didn't want his sons to have everything in life so they could appreciate what life is truly about. And I struggle a little bit with that. I say, what type of parents would like for their sons to suffer, you know? And I live my life through those words, and I truly make it a point to do what he related in that message. But seeing the whole interview that day was really, really tough. And mom has always been the pillar. She's always been, the strong one. It's when you talk about mom and dad, it's truly a love story. Mom never ever dated anyone. She's still married to dad. And it's I speak. I go into many speaking engagements, and usually I would say towards the end that I feel very, very proud to be Roberto Clemente sons, but also extremely fortunate to be Vera's son as well. And the one time I did not say this, I was in Notre Dame Church in New York, and there was someone in the audience who was from probably Austria or from Europe, and she came to me in tears saying, "You know what? I don't know your father's story, but the way you spoke today says so much about your mother." And that, to me, I called her and told her, "You know what? I just have to let you know that people truly appreciate what you've done, all these years." So the book, I don't know if you have had a chance to see it yet, but we included many, many photos and many images of Dad in ways that people have never ever seen before. And there's no captions, so the book, it serves like two purposes at the same time. We're telling our stories, but at the same time, we're also providing images that you're just going to share as you go along and read it. You're going to see it's very easy to read. And so far, I've gotten people saying, I'm just devouring it. I can't put it down. I love it, and that's what we wanted. We really wanted to share the stories that we know that people don't really even imagine of that. And this is probably the reason there hasn't been a film done about him yet. We're working on that. Thomas Tall, who did 42, the Jackie Robinson story. He did the latest Batman film, and also Hangover. Probably people will know more about that one. We met in Pittsburgh. He's from Pittsburgh, and we were already talking about first doing a documentary, and then doing the film. So that's in the process as we speak. So we're very, very happy to be here with all of you, and thank you for being here as well. So I don't know if anyone has any questions. Yes.
Is living in Texas part of the suffering?
That's a very interesting question. I still live in Puerto Rico. Roberto Jr. lives in Texas, and I think we're only 11 months apart, but it's funny how we each dealt with Dad's loss, and it was not till probably several years ago. I'm 47 now. I was only 6 at the time.
Getting old.
She doesn't wait to just like stick it in. Getting old, yeah. I know, right? But Roberto was, and when you look through the book, you're going to see a picture where you see Roberto Jr. kissing a picture of Dad. There was posters that were made, and that was on a Memorial Day in Pittsburgh at the ballpark. Probably when they retire the uniform, probably the same day. And people compare that picture to John F. Kennedy Jr. when he was saluting the casket when he went by. And there's Roberto kissing that picture. So I think he went through the toughest time because he had a premonition, imagine at that age. And he told the day of the act, he told Dad, "Don't get on that plane going to crash." And he had to live life with kind of like a guilty conscience that he didn't do enough to stop him from getting on that plane. My grandfather, my father's father, also had a premonition that day. And Mom, and I'll let her explain it, but that day before they went to the airport, there was a song about another incident that a flight that went down with a whole volleyball team on a Good Friday, Holy Friday. And there was a song about that, and that song came through her mind that morning as well. There was many, many different, signs that happened that day. that they all pointed to the same thing.
And he was interested in hearing it, or he was that determined, or
He was definitely determined. He knew he had a need to go there. A lot of people don't know that they feel that that was the plane with the cargo and aid that never made it to Nicaragua. There were 3 flights that actually made it, and also a sea barge that got to Nicaragua.
Yes.
Before that flight,
Before.
the day before. So I'll let Mom explain.
We were already working the campaign as soon as that the earthquake happened in Nicaragua. And then Roberto, we were in this special event that they were honoring the artists and sport persons in a hotel in San Juan. When then that afternoon, that evening, we heard about the tragedy in Nicaragua. And right there, at that activity, we start talking one with each other and try to plan a campaign. Then next day, Roberto and one of the singers from Puerto Rico, they went to a TV show to announce the campaign. Then that was right on Christmas, because then there was a Sunday, I remember now. Everybody was carrying even children carrying their presents from Christmas, and all pack. And they were making donations, with long lines at the stadium, Irán Bithorn Stadium in San Juan. And that was when we started the campaign. Then we sent, there was a strike of cargo planes on those days. Then Roberto rented this cargo plane that wasn't a big one, but wasn't too small either. It wasn't, that one went 3 times. And he sent volunteers, about 5 of them, one to install some 5 X-ray machines that we sent the first flight with medicines. We try to make space first for the more important things like medicines, medical equipment. They send by radio amateur information that we need. For example, an instrument for a surgery, whatever. Then Roberto used to go right away to the medical center, and they give him everything he needs, for the next flight, to send everything for the doctors first, for the hospital, to save life. And then the rest of the space, we put everything else. I remember in the first flight, we sent 5 X-ray machines with medicines, and we sent a friend of us went there, a registered nurse. She went there, and another person went to install the machines and to keep repairing all the electric problems. He stayed there, 5 persons. We are going to stay there since the first flight. They came back after Christmas, after the accident. We sent to pick them up there. But Roberto got involved. He thought, at the beginning, he thought that it was better for him because nobody tell him no for anything that he needs, And he said, I think I should stay because whatever they need, I can get it in minutes, very, very fast. And if I'm not here, I can help there, but then probably it will be more difficult to get everything they need in an emergency. But then he decided to go, to bring all our friends that were there to check that everything was running okay. And, but there were many advices, like Luis was telling you, many advices, but everything already passed. But I know he's with us always, all these years he's always with us, but it's hard to forget. We never forget every little detail.
Yes.
A mic so the people online can hear.
Put the pressure on me. I just wanted to, I have a comment and then a question if I could. I just want to say thank you to the family. I think you guys have represented Clemente's memory and have represented Puerto Ricans and Latinos in general with such class and grace. that it's heartwarming to see you guys do what you've done. From a personal perspective, I was a young Puerto Rican growing up in New York, so he was my hero. This is my son, Roberto.
Oh, really?
Hi,
Wow.
nice to
And
meet
he's-
you. God bless you.
How are you?
Very handsome.
And that's my other son.
Uh-huh.
And see. Well, obviously Roberto for obvious reasons. And I would just had a thought that thinking about how we lost him so early, right, and how you think what he would have been doing today. I mean, especially when you think of things like Latino rights, immigration reform, and I just imagine what a voice that he probably would have been a powerful.
Yes.
He would have been a powerful voice. I just wonder if you thought about that and you've ever thought about what he would be doing today, or what he would have been doing during this, especially during this immigration debate.
First of all, thank you. Thank you for keeping Dad's legacy alive. And seeing Roberto, there's a lot of people and couples that have named their sons Roberto. Somewhere in their name, we know of one of like it's like a Roberto or like a Jonathan Roberto Arkwright. They have nothing to do with Latino at all. But a lot of people come and they have sent birth certificates for mom to dedicate them, so they understand why they were named after that, and that's great. You're just saying that you don't understand what we feel, So thank you. That was an activist. That was truly, he did not put up with prejudice. He did not tolerate it, any of that. It's interesting, when people see the Jackie Robinson story, and you have kind of like a sense of what was going on at the time. The film was done very accurately. And Jackie was chosen by Branch Rickey to break that barrier. In that case, no one prepped him. No one spoke to him about what he was going to encounter when he left Puerto Rico. And they were and on top of that, they were trying to hide him. The pirates were trying to hide him so no one else could pick him up. And they would not explain to him that process. So whenever he was performing and he was really delivering what he was supposed to do, they would sit him down. They would put him on the bench. And even at times when they the team would realize that there was a scout in the stands, even in the first inning, his first time at bat, they would pull him out of the game. And he was very frustrated. He didn't understand what was going on because no one would explain to him what they were doing. So he got to the point where he was planning on actually just leaving. And Howie Hake, the scout from the Pirates, came to him and said, "Listen, Roberto, do not do that because they're going to black. And if that happens, then we're not going to be able to acquire you. But next year, I promise you're going to be playing for the Pirates. You're going to be playing at the Major League Baseball level." So he convinced him, and he stayed. And ever since, when everything he went through, when he was in buses after the games, waiting for the rest of the teammates to go to restaurants, and whoever was black or Hispanic had to wait in that bus while the rest of the teammates would go there. He didn't put up with that. He says, "You know what? No one should go through this." And he spoke to his general manager from the team and asked to get a separate station wagon so they would travel separately. And so always. So today, with everything going on with immigrations and whatnot, I strongly believe he would be a very strong voice. He would totally, let government know how he felt about it and how he would support, the changes that should be made. And I'm pretty sure they would listen because he had his way. People don't know when the Players Association started, Marvin Miller, when they incorporated the Players Association, that was one of the pillars, in the Baseball Players Association. Representative chosen by the players, and meetings were held in Puerto Rico from the Players Association. People don't know this, but that had a lot to do with that, and he was always defending the rights for everyone. He always said, "I'm not looking to be treated better. I'm actually looking to be treated equally. So there was always a balance. You know, he always dressed very nice when he went to the games, while the other players were probably in flip flops or shorts. He was wearing suits, and there's a joke about that because Manny Sanguilla, and we're still very close. And he says, you know what? He used to say, "I'm Italian," because he used to dress very nice all the time, and it's amazing to be around those guys still today, and hear the stories. It's just an incredible treat. So. Yes.
Do I need it? I don't think it's working.
It's for
Oh, okay. To your reference to the, human rights and his approach and his feeling towards that, I mean, must have been such a contrast because in the island compared to the States, nada que ver. I mean, growing up in Puerto Rico, you didn't see that division of mulatto and white, black. It was, I grew up there. I'm a Cuban Rican, actually. I had the pleasure of and the blessing of growing up in an island that was as close as to my island as it could be. So I see the contrast between the United States back then and really the merit that someone like that, someone so talented and at the same time to be so humble, it's to me admiring. That's one. Point number two, I went to Colegio San Antonio in Puerto Rico, and I had a lot of friends in Park Gardens, and you guys had the house in Parkville.
still there.
And I remember it was a major thing just to go in our bicycles or walking, whatever, and the house was up in a hill, and on the side in the landscape, you had the bat and you had the ball made of rocks.
Yes.
I remember that.
And 21 is a bat. Yeah.
With the I remember that vividly. And third, but not least, and this is on a very sad note, I was at I don't know, there was a club in Puerto Rico where all the Cubans would gather. It was called the Casa Cuba, el Círculo Cubano de Puerto Rico. I was there the night that Roberto had the fatal accident. And everybody's going to know my age now. I was 12 years old, and I remember vividly, we actually saw the plane, and people were saying, was it fireworks? Was it, everybody was, and later we got the notice that it was Roberto's flight going as an aid trip to Nicaragua. And all the lights, it was the most sad and heavy atmosphere I can remember as a child. All the lights were turned off because they were doing the search and they didn't want to have any distraction. I remember vividly, and the sadness of knowing, where he lived and where I so many times would sneak to see if we could take a glance at him, knowing that he was gone. So thank you for being here. To me, it's really moving.
Thank you. Thank you. I get that a lot. People always say, they compare always when they heard the notice of when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, and this is, I remember exactly what I was doing, and they also remember what they were doing when they found out about that. And I have a mental image of Puerto Rico. There's a commercial about a local beer, that showed Puerto Rico in the world, like flashing during the holidays, Christmas, whatever, and then everything starts shutting down and the lights start disappearing, but Puerto Rico keeps going. In the Christmas, we celebrate Christmas all the way through from October to February, La Octavita and all that. But I always get what you just said, and that image of the Christmas lights being turned off. It's very powerful because, Puerto Ricans like to celebrate their holidays big time. And everyone says, I remember exactly how they would tell my father, turn the lights off immediately. They're saying that's a recollection. A lot of people say, I never saw my father cry until that night. And I was wondering, why was he crying? So it's very powerful what transpired with that incident, and we all have shared a lot of different stories about that. And my memories going back home, I drew a blank at one point because when the accident happened, we were used to not seeing Dad all the time because of the season, okay? And we were born and raised in Puerto Rico, so we were used to not seeing Dad at the house all the time because during the season we were in Puerto Rico. Poor Mom had to travel the 3 times she was pregnant, about to give birth. He obligated her to travel to Puerto Rico because we had to be born there. You know, there was no.
You back, after they born.
That was not a, absolutely no chance that was not going to be the
He
case.
was
So
very proud to be Puerto Rican. He said, "My sons, they have to born where we born." Like I used to go to Puerto Rico and then come back with the babies.
So when the accident happened, I know that they took us to one of my brother's godfather's house, and when we went back to the house the first time, my recollection is, imagine this. I mean, the street is full of people, full of cars, and it was like a 2-door entrance. There's a little bridge, and there's a pond underneath when you walk into the house. And I remember walking through the bridge, and the doors wide open. There was a Puerto Rican flag, American flag, 2 MPs, house full of total strangers. And they had something similar to this, kind of like a little podium, something with the book where you sign in. When you go to a funeral home and you're paying your respects, how people, write, like saying that they were there and paying their respects. So there was that to the right side of the doorway. I remember that. And then when we walked in, everyone just jumped on us. Oh, there are the kids. And they started grabbing us, and we were very confused. What's going on? This is my house. What are all these people doing here? And finally, when we first saw the immediate family was when we went to Mom's bedroom. And that's where it was. That's when we saw Mom. We saw uncles. We saw, like immediate family there. Right, grandmother. Everyone that was family was inside that room, and that stayed with me forever. That memory was just, I can't even explain it. And then, but it's still after that day, it took me a long time to realize what happened. Because once again, we were used to not seeing Dad all the time. So eventually he's going to show up. Eventually, years. No, not the case. So I used to find a very secluded place in the house in a corner where I would go and cry every day when I realized. But I would hide and do that. And then I had to disconnect myself. The way I coped with it was just not relating to the name. I would even drive, even at that age. I would be driving, I would see the John F. Kennedy Avenue. To me, or Roberto Clemente Avenue was the same as Roosevelt Avenue, whatever. I did not relate to it. And that's how I was able to cope with that. And it's funny, the earlier question about living in Houston, my brother, Junior, there was one year where he wanted to complete the flight to Nicaragua. And they knew exactly the weight of the cargo that was going there. And when he told me this, I says, listen, you are on your own on that one. Because I already did what I needed to do, and I understand this is what you may have to do to continue, with your life. And I understand that, but don't even ask me to come along. And I said, but I have only one question for you, which is, when Dad was going to Nicaragua, there was a true need to go there. I asked him, what would happen if something, whatever happens, while you're in the midst of doing this trip, will you continue to go there? And he looked at me. We left that, we just left it at that. But then, 2 days later, guess what happened? Indonesia, the tsunami. And he was freaking out. He calls me and says, Luis, what you told me. And I said, okay, so now, are you going to still go there? He says, absolutely not. So we spearheaded the efforts from Puerto Rico to take the relief to Indonesia when the tsunami happened. So at Sport City, Roberto Clemente, Ciudad Deportiva Roberto Clemente, every single day, people would show up with bags, garbage bags, just full of clothes or medical, whatever they could find. They would bring it over. The Red Cross says, you know what? We're just going to handle the funds, the money. You guys deal, with the aid. Yeah, that was quite a task. We were able every day when we left Sport City, everything was organized. The very next morning, we will come in and we say, "Wait a second, didn't we just went through all this yesterday?" It was more stuff coming in every day. We were able to put up 74 pallets, but we had to measure, give the dimensions of the boxes, everything, the weight, and at the very end, it was okay. So now, how do we move it from here? It was FedEx who actually came through, and they were commemorating. It was like their 50th anniversary. It was one of their anniversaries, and they says, you know what? We believe in what you're doing. We want to be part of this. So they sent all the trucks, FedEx trucks. They pick up everything, and they charter a flight. They left behind pacemakers, whatever, they left everything behind just to accommodate all of the cargo that we put together. And it was very, it was very touching because Mom was there with us and, when they were loading the plane. So imagine all those memories came back. And I told Roberto Jr., I said, listen, I truly believe this is what we should be doing. We should, to continue to deal with Dad's legacy, anything that is named after Dad, and everyone who's part of that should have a mission. And we want to be able to have students help us out whenever there's a natural disaster anywhere. We want all of the students on Clemente schools. There's elementary, middle, high school. Now we're talking about integrating a scholarship fund also for Clemente students who go to college. But we want them. I want to be able to send a mass email whenever there's a natural disaster and have all the schools convert into 8 collection centers and have probably either FedEx, UPS help us gather, pick up in the ground transportation and take it to probably the train station. I spoke to folks from Amtrak to see if they would actually dedicate one of their carts to our foundation, and they said, you know what, that they'd love that idea. So we're able to move everything where it's needed. And so at this point, that's part of what we're doing and working, day to day.
Yes, my name is Lindell Pettis, and I first want to thank you for sharing Roberto, with Pittsburgh. I'm a Pittsburgher. And
great.
My history, which is so amazing and humble that I'm here, is as a kid, I hung in Market Square, and there was times that I shined your father's shoes and Manny Sanguillen's shoes. And I remember Manny Sanguillen and your father coming to Market Square. Manny had a brown Lincoln with kids in the back seat, and I don't know if they would come there to go to the Oyster House and get fish sandwiches, but I think your father would get out and he would go to Chock full of Nuts and maybe get fresh ground coffee. And as a kid, Market Square, that was my little hangout, on the weekends. And your father, he was a very, very nice, humble person. And also, Dolores Parker.
Yeah.
Dolores Stargell is my mother's distant cousin. So I grew up around the whole mystique of the Pirates and Danny Murtaugh, and it's like I said, I'm humbled to be here in front of you because a lot of my friends that when we were kids, that's what we did. We had shoe shine boxes. We always wanted to work, but we wasn't old enough to work, and we would go around the stadiums. We would go to Market Square, and on certain days, like on the weekends, we would see some of the Pirates or some of the Steelers there. And your father, he was very, very humble. You mentioned about the immigration and his activism, and I could honestly say as a kid growing up, and I don't know if this is the mystique of Roberto, but in Pittsburgh, anytime anything ever happened in a Latin American country, we would march, and we would always stand up for the stuff going on during Pinochet or or Allende and all that in Pittsburgh. And a lot of me living in South Florida, I don't know if a lot of Latins know that there was some of us in the North that any atrocities in the Caribbean or in Latin America, as people of color in those other northern cities, we would stand up and we would march to bring it, to hopefully be able to bring it to a halt from within the United States. But your father, I have stuff at home that, that I bought 20 years ago, with the family and all that, but I'm humbled that, I'm humbled that I had the opportunity to know him, share him, touch him, and Manny Sanguian, L. Oliver, my first job was at the Three River Stadium as a Zum Zum, so I'm a Pittsburgh, I'm a Pirate fan, by heart. But again, thanks for bringing out the book and sharing this, and I'm really touched to be in front of you, man. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, your father was a giant. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Yes, ma'am. I don't know if there's many Pittsburghers here, but
I can't even explain. People come to us and tell us their story, and usually they say, you know what, I'm sure you must be tired of listening, to all these stories, and I said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. We totally embrace those stories because that's how we get to know how that was an impact to many people. And there's I got tears.
When I saw you come in, I guess I got goosebumps to believe that I'm here talking with you because I lived across the street from Jose Bagon as well, and like I said, that's and I haven't said this to anyone about Roberto, but
Mom raised us very humble. Extremely, like you would not believe. People that get to know us, they said, man, if I were Clemente, forget it. I would be like walking on air. And I say, well, that's why you're not Clemente. Because to be a Clemente, you have to be, first of all, humble. And never forget your roots and never forget, what you represent. And Mom did an incredible job with us. But there's a funny story where after the accident, we always loved Pittsburgh. And you don't understand, because when we were growing up, there were a lot of kidnappings going on in Puerto Rico. So we were not even allowed outside the door, the front door. And there was always some security presence outside the door. And when the accident happened, Mom actually surprised us by letting us know that she actually bought a house in Green Tree. So she was giving us all. She had a whole list of what not to do. All right, when we got there. Rule number 1: you are not to step on the neighbor's lawn. That was rule number 1. Okay, and the list went on and on and on and on and on. But we got there. I never forget. Imagine you as a kid, you're walking to a new house. The sheets were Mickey Mouse. I remember like today. Tio Henry, Tio Elsa, they're gone now. But we had family in Pittsburgh. We had Dad made friends with people that were not friends; they were family. And since I was born, basically I grew up knowing that they were our second grandparents, uncles, aunts. So the very next morning when we wake up in that house, I'm not kidding, there had to be at least 30-some kids outside waiting with wiffle balls and bats to play. And I don't know how the word got out, whatever, but we were out there immediately. Neighbor across the street, there was center field, right field, left field, we were all over our lawn, the front lawn. The first week it was already brown. We burned it, just playing wiffle ball every single day. But Mom was so relaxed. She was just so, in Puerto Rico, people will come and ring the door, but whatever, she would be like, who's there, whatever. In Pittsburgh, he's like, oh, check to see who's there. You know, she was like so relaxed. So we wanted to move to Pittsburgh.
And the door
You know,
will stay open,
the door will be open. You know, I mean, we embrace everyone who will come through that door. And the memories, you know, of being there were so incredible. But one time, and this is why I started talking about this, we're in a parking lot, and we're in a car waiting, and there's a car that pulls up, and there's a guy in there who definitely had a lot to drink, you know, and he was kind of like bubbling, saying things, whatever. But he heard Roberto and I speaking in Spanish, so he's like, "Hey, what's that language?" And we said, "Oh, that's Spanish." "Oh yeah, where your kids from?" "Puerto Rico." He says, "Puerto Rico." He says, "Oh yeah, there was a famous player that played for the Pirates, whatever." So for the first time, he was so excited. For the first time, I said, "Roberto, tell him, you know, he was dad." And he looks at me like, "Really?" I said, "Go ahead, tell him, you know, because I know he's gonna get a kick out of it. You know, he's gonna appreciate it." So Roberto said, "Oh yeah," and he says, "Yeah, also he says, what was his name?" He says, "Arriba." So he said, "Yeah, Roberto Clemente." "Yeah, Roberto, the great one. Yeah, the whole thing, right?" So he's like celebrating dad and the whole thing. I said, "Go ahead, tell him, go ahead." So Roberto said, "Oh yeah, we're his sons." He said, "Yeah, the great one." He kept going. He said, "He said, yeah, we're his sons." You know, it's like, "Yeah, but Roberto, this is third time. Yeah, we're his sons." I said, "Forget it. Never mind." You know, that was the one time that we said, "All right, you know, I think someone is going to appreciate, you know, who we are, whatever." I said, "No, we have to stick to you know what we are, who we are. We don't go around with signs. I'm Clemente's son or whatever, you know." When I was going to college, when I signed with the Pirates in 85, 84, we were. Are you telling me something? I'm speaking too much. But you know, when I signed, I was in college, so my teachers figure this one out. The next day, say, "Hey, I have a question for you." I said, "What's that?" "I saw a guy in the news last night, and he looked just like you." "Yeah, that was me." I said, "You mean to tell me you are Clemente's son and you never even told anyone?" You know, so that's been our life.
I'm from Old San Juan, but I went to school in Pittsburgh.
Ah.
From 1958 to 1962. I went to Duquesne University.
Oh, wow.
And at that time in Pittsburgh, there probably were like 5 or 6 Puerto Ricans.
That was it. At the
But we
most.
had a godmother. Maybe, Vera, you remember Doris Sipek? And she always had dinners for us and parties for us, and she always included Roberto, the 6th Puerto Rican, when he was in Pittsburgh. And sometimes Peruchin Cepeda, he would take the Peruchin with him.
And he'd bring visiting ball players.
Yes. And so he, of course, we all adored him. But it was 1960, and I was on campus in Duquesne, which is up on a hill. And Forbes Field is not too far, is it? How far is Forbes Field?
Right, in Oakland, yeah.
In Oakland.
Yeah.
And I was coming out of my class, and I was going across the campus, and Forbes Field erupted into a thunderous roar. And I did not follow baseball, you know. So I didn't know what was going on, and my classmates came over to me and started kissing me and hugging me and congratulating me, and I didn't know why. And it was because that was the game that they won the pennant. When Roberto I don't know what he did. He had hit a running ball or something, and I got all the credit. Oh, and I remember too, but
Yes.
when he got engaged to you, he brought a picture to Pittsburgh of you, and you were movie star gorgeous.
Oh, yeah.
We all were at that time.
Still are.
Yes.
Still are. You know what? Yes, the fans in Pittsburgh. What you're talking about? There's many people that that tell us how. And Duquesne University was the first, so you know, to already install a Clemente scholarship. We just met three young women, girls that were the first recipients of that scholarship last year. So and when we were just in Pittsburgh on the 17th of September for Clemente Day, I had the opportunity to meet with several government officials to see if all of Pennsylvania State would actually, in higher education, would actually include our Roberto Clemente scholarship. So we're working on that right now as we speak. And there's so much that goes on. There's so much that we do, but we do it the way Dad used to do things. One of my favorite pictures. Yes, yes. One of the favorite pictures is he's got some mail under his leg, and there's the box, the fan mail, and those letters were from the cities he was going to play next. So he would go visit patients in hospitals and take things without camera, without the press, and he did it from the heart. And that's how we've done things. So people don't necessarily know all that we do. And sometimes we're being criticized because that's a human nature. But people don't really understand the scope of how far Dad's legacy is still ongoing. So thank you for your comments. That's yes.
We were also looking for, we did a show which is called Perfiles for ESPN, and I knew there were photos from this gathering. I talked to Teruchin Cepeda, and we're looking for the photos to get new documents, and there's a couple of archivos perdidos that I think that are interesting if we can get a hold of them, But when we told that story, we had to leave out so much, And for those of us who grew up with the shadow and remember the day that Clemente died, I have friends here that we've worked and stuff together. It's a very, very wide footprint that he left that you only know, that you find out more and more. I'm sure it's got to be a burden too, also.
Yes. I during African American History Month, I saw a documentary that really, I don't know why, but it kind of was an awakening for me. And it was talking about the USS Constellation. This ship was built in the 1800s from the Navy. And it was sent to different missions. And one of the missions was they sent it to the west coast of Africa to kind of like save, and prevent slave smuggling when it was illegal at that time. And whatever slaves were rescued from these other ships, they would not just take back to Africa anywhere and just drop them off on the coast. They would take them specifically to Liberia. And Liberia was protected, and they would ensure that these people were not going to be hunted again. And it just clicked because in 1994, Liberia issued a $1 and $10 coin in Dad's honor. And I said, check it out. It just clicked. It's like, wow. So this place, as early as the 1800s, is dealing with human rights, and they recognize that as one of the biggest humanitarians. That is very deep, very deep. And then the end of that documentary was very, very interesting. When the ship came back to New York, the crew that was together protecting other people's rights, human rights, now we're saying goodbye only to face each other in the Civil Rights War. So they would probably killing each other when they were already working together before. It was I cannot even explain, how much I learned from that documentary and how much it touched me. And immediately after, there was not even a TV commercial. Immediately after, there was another documentary which was explaining like everything about how African Americans actually struggled and fought for their rights till finally they show you Obama. You have a president. Then they go backwards again, and they start slowly telling you the first year when African American kids were able to go to white schools and how the whole process started. And I started piecing together. I said, hold on a second. That was this year? That started playing in 1954. That was his first year. That was only, so he was in the midst when all this was going on. And for him to be able to accomplish what he was able to accomplish, being not only black but also Puerto Rican, and not knowing the language, you know, it's a story to be told, definitely. And what I got from that, and the inspiration I got from that was, you know what, there could be, but I've never seen a documentary such as that one from Hispanics. What has been the Hispanic? I'm not talking about Simón Bolívar, the conquistadores. I'm talking about the modern day Hispanic. What has been the contributions everywhere we're at? And I was so inspired by it that I said, all right, so such as the book, I felt a new documentary has to be done. And I'm not going to start it in the U.S. I'm not going to start it in Puerto Rico. I'm going to start it in those places that actually recognize that as a great humanitarian. So I want to be able, the USS Constellation still exists. It's in Baltimore. Said I'm going to start my documentary on that ship. And just the way I explained to you now, I want to be able to tell the story. Why am I there? You know, and what that ship means to me. And tell the story, and also then from there, I want to go to Liberia. My son, Luis Jr., he's 22 now, and he is a graphic artist, and he came out with this, he created a family shield, a new family shield. And the center of that shield is the U1 bat model that Dad designed with Louisville's lager. So he has that bat. It's a very particular bat because it don't have the knob at the end. It's like just like flawless, and because we have little hands, right? And it would bother this part of the hand. So he developed a bat which has nothing at the end. So Luis included that bat in the middle, and I want to be able to go to Louisville's lager, place an order of those bats that will become life-size shields. That in appreciation to these countries, we want to take those shields with us and present them to them, thanking them for what they've done, recognizing that as a great humanitarian. So that's going to be the documentary. We're going to go to Liberia, Africa, the first place ever named to that was in Mannheim, Germany, weeks after the accident. Okay, and then Japan has a similar award. You'll see us at the third game of the World Series presenting the Clemente Award. Japan has a similar award in their professional baseball league. So we're going to go to Japan, and then we'll start a tour from San Francisco. That's where the World Baseball Classic was held, and Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico played for the championship game. That has a big message, you know. I think those were the players that was representing, and for them to actually get to the World Baseball Classic and fight for the championship has a different meaning, more meaningful than what we are. You know, people talk about in the future, Hispanics are the fastest growing minority group, whatever. People don't realize it already happened. You know, the Pope is Argentinian. Obama was elected by the Hispanic vote. You know, there's so much that we're doing, and people don't realize it. That my inspiration through all those documentaries that I told you I saw is to, as I'm telling that story, I want to also tell, you know, what is the Hispanic contribution all throughout the United States. And as we go to different cities, you know, I'm going to start collecting that data and explain it. And really, this is probably the last thing I'm going to say, but there's fan mail, so you understand. At the house, we still have fan mail from back the time where the accident happened. And my brother Ricky showed me, he brought some mail out, and he knows I'm working on this tour project and everything. When I read this particular mail, was from a 19-year-old college student. And she sent her launch ID card because she was going to be in Cooperstown and she wanted mom to recognize her if she saw her. Okay? And in that note, in that letter, she says that she is a great Clemente fan. She has a whole wall dedicated to Dad in her dorm, that students will come and knock at the door just to come see her wall. And it was an incredible letter, you know. And I said, do you imagine if we're able to locate these people today, and now through Facebook and through all the, 40 years later, we show up at their door with the original letter saying, hey, guess what? I'm such and such. Do you remember this? We're here to thank you. And that's what we want to be able to do. So.
Question about the second and third generation. Do any of you have actually gotten involved in sports at all?
I'm sorry, in sports?
In sports?
Yeah, well, actually, Roberto Jr. and I, we did sign professionally. Roberto signed with the Phillies, which I don't understand how fans got a hold of the home number, and they were bombarding that phone, asking Mom how was it possible that she allowed that to happen, that Roberto was signed with the Phillies. The next year I signed with the Pirates. Ricky did not sign because Ricky was very talented as well, but he doesn't, he was traumatized by the accident and he doesn't travel, he doesn't fly. It's been 21 years since his last flight, and he's in the States. He came up for Clemente Day this year, and it's a magical year because he's got 21 all over it, so he didn't sign, but Roberto and I did. Our sons, I have my youngest right now. He's going to the Carlos Beltran Baseball Academy in high school. He's a senior, and he just literally got back from the perfect game last week, and so he's very talented. He is athletic. His physique is just ridiculous, and Dad was an athlete before. He went to sign professionally, and he threw the javelin and all that. Well, Bobby has already won national championships in athletics and whatnot. So they, our second or third generations are showing the talent. We'll see where it leads it. Yes.
We're going to make this our last question so we can get to signing some books.
Okay.
Of course, he's a great hero, but he must have had some flaws. What were his flaws?
You know what? That's very interesting. I've been asked literally to not come along with people who want to make a documentary because they says your father had to be real. It's impossible that he was so perfect that no one has nothing negative to say about him. I said, all right. So I let them go by themselves to see if they can dig some dirt, like they say, and they come back saying, I give in. It's. Well, actually, hold on. Mom's the one to answer that one.
We used to go to bed like 5 o'clock in the morning because he cannot sleep. And then we stayed in the basement. He was making ceramics. I accompanied him until 5 o'clock in the morning when the milkman bring the milk to the door. Then he used to do many arts and crafts and many things, paint and do ceramics. He have 3 kilns in the basement. He used to play, he have a big organ at the living room. He used to play Hammond organ. Yeah, he play by ear, but perfect. He has many talents, But he was very talented. The harmonica, I used to play the harmonica. So we
he had like a brace
yeah.
with a harmonica, and he would be
and we stay up until 5 o'clock in the morning, when he was at home. Yes, he had a bad accident when his oldest brother was in a hospital, and he went to see him with his brother. Coming back to our area, I didn't know him on those days because he was younger, And then he had a big accident. Since that time, he was suffering from his vertebrae. I used to work on his back. I learned. He taught me different techniques, and I helped him a lot before he go to the stadium. I was assistant. Many people come, friends, bring another friends home because when they used to leave the house, they were walking, like in 2 treatment at least. They were like new, brand new. That was like he has something. I think that he has the technique. He learned how to do it because he suffered himself. But he has something special, something that God gave him, because people that they need a surgery, they don't need it. He just worked at least 2 times or 3, and they were okay.
The accident that Mom's talking about, the accident, basically, he was on his way to see his brother who had brain surgery. And that brother actually died 31st of December. In Dad's life, there's so many different things that happen that couldn't even be scripted. Even before Mom's parents were married, Dad had an older sister, like the sister before him, and that was like a very internal joke in the family, because she used to ask the parents that she wanted another baby brother, but she wanted the brother to be white, right? So when Dad was born, my grandfather kind of presented the brother to her. Says, "Anaíris, here's your baby brother. He's white. Don't let it go black." But unfortunately, there was a bonfire in the back of the house, and her silk dress got caught on fire. So she had really bad degree burns. And when they were in the hospital, what happens is Mom's mother, before she was married, she was single, and Mom's father also, they were working in that hospital. So Dad's mom fell asleep, and Anaíris actually passed. She dies. So who did they send to get my grandfather? Mom's father, before they were married. So even early on, the families were crisscrossing, in very key times. And so that's why when we say, the story, we've signed with Disney, with many other that have attempted to do the film, but they don't have the true story. They don't have it. And that's why we're saying, you can look to fill in with probably some fantasies, whatever, but you will be leaving out so much that it doesn't make justice. So for us to read a script from someone, it's a waste of time. We say, what, we have the story. We want to sit with someone who has a production side, and let's do it right. And that's when you're going to see. Finally, believe me, when you go to the movies to see a Roberto Clemente story, you're going to get the right one, because that we've held all of that all this time to do it right. So thank you. Thank you so much.